FYI, I don't usually attend these, but I think Tigran is out today. So, just so people know.
You are the boss now?
No, no. I was saying, if people were waiting for Tigran, he's not coming.
Yeah, I think we should start.
I thought you were going to wear like a Tigran costume or something, Morgan.
I should. I'd have to shave my head a little bit though. So.
And grow your beard more.
Yeah. Well, I talked to him on Monday, and I think he'd shaved it all off actually.
Oh, he's visiting his home.
He's in Armenia right now, and
Yeah,
so he's taking a few days off. Yeah.
That's probably why he shaved, so he couldn't go like.
He's seeing his parents. He's all
guy.
clean shaven. Yeah.
Okay. I got it. Let's start. I think we should. Where is the meeting? Oh, here it is. I think there are some notes that got to our. Okay, I'm confused. So we have a section on 728. So please add your name there. But there are some topics up. I don't know if that needs to be discussed. Okay, let's start with the ones that are in the right place and then we can find. Ryan, I'm not here.
I'm not sure if if Ryan is here, but we have been sort of collaborating outside of this meeting to discuss the cumulative to delta processor.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, New Relic only accepts aggregation temporality delta for our backend, and so we have an interest in this cumulative to delta processor as well. And I think AWS has a use case for it. We have a number of features that we want to add and I guess bug fixes and stuff like that behind Ryan's PR. But we wanted to use that as kind of a starting point. So I approved that PR with the caveat that it's going to be modified.
Okay, so this is approved. Okay, I will take a look. So I don't know if you realize, but we made a lot of changes to the metrics because we had to move to the 0.9. So me and Alex, we were very focused on stabilizing the metrics. So that being said, that's not an excuse, but I will prioritize these PRs next. One thing that you can comment on all these PRs, just to force Ryan to do a rebase, because most likely he's using some of the deprecated APIs, and we want him to not do that.
Oh, it looks like Ryan just joined.
Hey, sorry, yeah. Sorry, I was a little bit late, sorry. So are we, okay. Oh, are you talking about the agenda I added for the PR I added here? Hey, Gordon. Yeah, here was some PR, so I saw some of your comments, but for the first one, it's like cumulative to delta conversion logic. We got some comments. I added some of the basic feedbacks, and I had a meeting with Alan, and we are thinking like we can, the primary use cases we can, he also implemented something on the other side, and I think maybe we can also take some of his works also together, put them together. So we are planning like we can merge this PR primary one, and on top of that we can another logic. I was expecting your comment on that. So yeah, for your thought, how do you feel about that one? And
so
yeah,
I think I will look again. I was mentioning before you joined that my primary focus was to transition to the new metrics 08 changes. So I think next comes your PRs and other PRs that are still in contrib, not reviewed. One thing that I want you to do as soon as possible is just rebase and make sure that you use the latest core version, because we deprecated a bunch of metrics APIs and I don't want you to use the old ones and then us going back to change them again.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I will do that today, and I will ping email maybe on Slack for that one. And for the second one, so I saw like you asked for Punya's opinion. Punya replied yesterday whether it should be a new processor or where it should go. But I think Punya suggested like we can merge this as a new processor. So also like what's your call here?
I thought we weren't adding new processors, Bogdan.
Sorry, I didn't get you. We weren't adding.
I thought the idea was not to add any additional processors, or until we have the new metrics processor design and implementation. But Bogdan, again, just deferring to what your thoughts are right now.
So it sounds like we have two different. Sorry, maybe I was not aware that is a policy that we had adopted. I knew that we are trying to not do much in the metric transform processor, because that has been implemented in a way that we don't want to support. I didn't know that there's a separate thing saying that we will not add any processors across the board. That seems like a very draconian decision, and I was not familiar with it.
I think that was very much in the short run. I mean, just while we are, stabilizing the collector right now.
I think, Lolita, I think this is a critical feature that Amazon needs. So I'm fine adding new processor as long as we understand that somebody needs to
that it'll change.
Yeah, that will change a bit when we're gonna start having an effort on consolidating all these things.
Right.
Is that for the core or for the contrib?
For the contrib.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Jurasi, but again, like how important is the core contrib distinction, given that what you're saying, right? That we're going to have components, like pretty much everything in core is going to move to contrib. So at that point, how does it matter?
Yeah, well, that's actually why I asked, because my understanding is that we're moving everything out of core into contrib, and it doesn't make sense to add anything new right now to the core, right? Only if anything, then just to the contrib.
Yeah.
Correct. And I thought this was a contrib. Well, let me not.
It is contrib.
Yeah,
but it's just about the fact that we are keep adding new processors for one functionality only, which may be the right path or may not be the right path that we want to adopt. So
I'm almost certain that it is not the right path, right? But we have to it's like a pressure vent, so that people are not blocked on getting their work done while we come up with the right design.
correct, but I think that signals me that we need to also prioritize the right design. If we're adding with this space new processors, it worries me that we should start doing this sooner than later.
So Bogdan, we have made a proposal on the processors, and we can definitely, we also have been working on a metrics processor design. So maybe we can have a design review next time.
Let's do that. I'm super happy. We already agreed about high level things, so it's just somebody starting to do the work. But in the meantime, I don't want to block Ryan, so let's accept that PR for the moment. The reason why I asked Punya was because I thought that Punya is leading the effort, and I want his opinion and to know about the people's needs. Like, look, it came one extra functionality, which I think it can be easily done by a generic transform processor that can support this. But anyway,
No, I think that's right. Bogdan, I agree completely. And Min has been leading
Yeah.
Has been working on the kind of the unified thing across signals.
Yeah, and we have also made progress
together.
on specific, starting to think about specific signals also, right, on the processors. So definitely, I think it would be good to have a sync on
But
that.
I think, Alida, what I'm taking away from that is that we need to, maybe we need to more clearly display, like share with the community the progress that we're making in a
Yes,
more
yeah,
like digestible format.
Exactly,
That's the
I
feedback
agree.
for us.
Yep, totally.
Okay,
Perfect.
thanks.
Let's not stay too much on this. So Ryan, as I said, please just make sure that today, after this meeting, you upgrade your core dependencies and stuff. Just that you don't use the old APIs that we are just planning to remove.
Yeah, I'll do that. As I missed the first part, did you say anything specific for the first one, like logic? Do you have any core requirement? As I said, like it supports the primary use case, and Alan will send another peer on top of this, which is kind of like already ready on his side. Do you have any like hard requirement for this that I missed? I mean, did you discuss anything before I joined?
No, we didn't discuss any technical
Okay.
details. We just said that we focus on other things, but now it's time to review these.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I guess that I am here only just to get some attention from you.
So Rehan, I have a question on your processor. Will this be a breaking change once things change and get consolidated into a new metrics processor? Will this be a breaking change on your
I
end?
mean, if this is merged with some other processor, that's a breaking sense, right? Customer cannot use this processor anymore if you deprecate this or something like this, or move into another processor. That's definitely a breaking sense.
And it's okay for your use case to have that kind of a change?
That's a good question. Like, so also it's depending on like our deprecation plan, maybe, as we are not maintaining any kind of config version or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should discuss that because Min had addressed this in the in the design that we are proposing, and I think maybe we should take a look at that.
So maybe can I ask one question? So Rehan, I know you need this data for different use case. In AWS, we already have a data like a delta or rate calculation logic existing in AWS internal folder, right? So like I told you before, what is this processor right now only need to satisfy AWS requirements? If that's the case, probably we should not have this processor just using the current the functionality or utility where we already have in the OTel collector. No.
Yeah. Agree with Min.
Yeah, if like this is also a use case for a New Relic or Google, yeah, probably that's another case. But we can consider to put it into the new processor design.
Okay, so guys, I think that delta to cumulative and cumulative to delta are independent of transforming stuff. So I think that will definitely we already decided that will be a processor that will probably stay for longer, because the difference between that and any other transformation is because this one requires state for doing things. So we agree that this will be a standalone processor. So I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the one that calculates rate.
Yep.
I think from my side, I would say maybe I can also confirm with like our PM side, but we are okay because we already have some experimental features and experimental processor for this release. So technically I am okay. But yeah. Well, thanks. So I think I will stop here. Thanks.
Okay, Rehan. I mean, action item on our end is to verify.
Yeah.
If you're okay with breaking changes, right, on the product side.
Thank you, Alita.
Thanks. Next. Go ahead.
Jurasi, I think you have the next item.
Yeah, okay. I thought someone was going to say something before me. but excuse me. But yeah, so I just wanted to ask, what is your current views on, and what is the current state of the creation of the new distributions repository? Right after I added this item, I saw a message added like yesterday by Sergey, and then one today by Mark Carter. I mean, I guess it's a question for Bogdan and Amelita, if it is something that we still want to pursue, and if so, I would like you, to leave a comment there, mainly to confirm that we've talked about this before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, at least I think we're all in agreement that we do want to have tooling for being able to have the flexibility to build core releases for the collector, as well as additional components, being bundled with the core for additional releases, and have that flexibility. So my understanding was that we're working together on building out this functionality, and Anthony and some of our other engineers have also worked on building out additional Go build tools. So Jurasi, confirming that we are all in agreement.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think you were not here last week, but I ran a demo on what I have so far on the distributions repository. Basically, it is already available. It is already able to create a core distribution, and the status as of today is that it can generate for a good number of platforms and architectures. It can generate RPMs and APKs and Debian files or Deb packages. It can create container images for multi-arch. So right now for AMD 64 and for ARM 64. The only thing that it cannot do today is MSI packages, because that requires Windows executors.
Yeah, it needs the signing also.
There is a
And
signing also, yeah.
Yeah, and if we need it, if we did any Mac OS, versions also, we'd have the same problem.
Mac OS is working with cross compilation, and I have to verify how it works with Homebrew, because I have no idea how it works. Mac OS is not my road. But for the PLC, I think it is already good enough for us to show and tell, and perhaps move from the PLC stage to a more this is the solution that we want stage.
Jurasi, I see that you asked for a new repo. I'm a bit confused there. I would prefer actually to put our distribution in the same repo with the builder, just for simplicity. I know I'm biased because I worked in a mono repo for a long time and I really enjoyed that, but I think it's better to have them closer to the builder, and also we could run things and check with our distributions if they are building and stuff like that when we change the builder.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with that, Bogdan, because I think it'd be just easier for people to discover and find.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the builder, the target audience for the builder is really people like me building a distribution, like Red Hat distribution of the collector, not so much end users. And the target audience for the distributions repository would be end users, people who were going there to find distributions. And the thought behind that is that we could then build a UI for the distributions repository that would then allow people to mix and match and download whatever they want from that repository. So the builder is just the tool that is being used by the distributions to build things.
I think I have something to add. I think people got confused because distribution, they're already like Red Hat distribution and other distributions and so on. Is this repo is going to be somewhere that like we will be building those type of distributions, or is it just kind of like sample distributions?
Yeah, I thought it was more focused, Jurasi, on developer distributions. I didn't think it was actually end user distributions, because that comes with a whole, productionized platform and guarantees that end users need to have, especially customers. So I'm not sure I agree with your assumption.
Yeah, so distributions, the output of the distributions repository, and the name, we can change it to better match the expectations. But the output of that repository is a binary that end users can use, can download and then make use of. So the core distribution that we have today, or whatever we go to the release tab on GitHub, and whatever we see there to download and to make use of, is now going to be made by the distributions repository. So the collector is only going to be an API. It's only going to be a library type of repository. So not producing any deliverables.
Okay, so I mean, I wouldn't call that a distribution. I just called it a release, right? With different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, contrib is going to be the second. And just for fun, I added a one distribution there called a load balancer, just with the load balancing exporter, just to prove the point that we can have multiple distributions built as part of that. But I agree, releases is sounds like a better name for that.
Yeah, because I think, I mean, there's a distinct difference, that.
And I think initial people, that's why people got confused.
Yes, yes, exactly.
What the rip was.
All right, so before we move forward, can I ask you all to read the proposal again and go over there and make those changes, or make those suggestions there, and then once we have that sorted out, then we go to the board and we go wherever we want to go, and we say, this proposal has approval from X, Y, and Z, and this is what we want to do.
Sounds good, Teresa. That sounds good. Let's do that by next week and make sure that we can review it.
Who can? Sorry, Eric.
I had one extra question for Jesse before we moved on. Is that okay?
Sure.
When you also mentioned adding for fun a load balancing, like release or distro, would this potentially be a place in the future where something like a cloud native or some other, like including other combinations of processors and receivers and exporters live? I know that's a topic we talked about a few months back, and I was hoping to connect the dots.
Yeah, so that repository, so that releases repository is only going to contain things that the OpenTelemetry community wants to deliver to end users, right? So the agents in the future, perhaps, or sidecars in the future, but right now only the core and the contrib, which is whatever we produce today already. Excuse me. Now, for the future, what we want to do is to get the builder and have a place where people can add metadata like the manifest files, and people here can be vendors. And we provide a UI for users to select which components they want. I think the example that was mentioned last week was Caddy's Caddy web server, where you can select which modules you want to use, and then it produces a binary for you. And so that's the end goal. But it's and I think the proposal brings all the tools, all the pieces together to make that possible in the future.
I'll review the rest of the proposal. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Shibo.
Sorry, Bogdan. So who commits here to read the proposal by next week? So Eric said he would.
I will.
I also will. Yeah. I also will.
All right, and Bogdan as well. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Shibo. Not sure I understand if this is about the collector or it's about AWS collector.
Yeah, so it's about AWS distro collector. Yeah, so it's just OpenPR waiting to be merged.
Okay, sorry, but I would like to call this, like, I know AWS is a big friends with us, but I think this kind of discussion should happen inside the AWS company.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, this is absolutely shouldn't be here.
Sorry, I just want to make sure we stay on the same line.
I think so. We're all on the same page.
Give me permissions, I'll merge it in.
Sorry, Shibo, for calling on this, but it's good for everyone to stay on track on this meeting. Yana, you are the next.
Yeah, I have an idea. There's a bunch of like productionization related issues. I put them in a doc. It's more of like summarizing what's on the issue tracker or stuff that we've been discussing about. And there are a couple of like overlaps. So it's not easy to take sometimes like one of the issues and like actually like act on it. So I was wondering, like, as we're getting closer to stabilization, maybe after stabilization or something for the collector, should we start a bit of like a focus group of a couple of people to work on this type of issues? Sounds good. But let's wait a bit. I've been socializing this list with other people to see if anybody wants to volunteer and so on.
So I think to be honest, if we have somebody leading this effort, and that person is willing to spend time even now, I'm happy. Bunch of them we need anyway at any moment. So you don't have to wait for anything. Just
That sounds good. Sounds good. Let's maybe like talk offline or something. Okay.
Yana, so the process is just to file a request on the community repo to request the work group, and
probably maybe like just happy with doing this on the collector repo. Like there's not like we may not need any working group or something.
No,
like
I mean we don't need a
separate,
repo, but in order to schedule a regular published
yeah, we need a meeting. That's
meeting.
That's true.
Something that we need to make a request for.
All right.
I think we can have a second time on the same SIG. If you don't want to start a proper SIG in the whole community, we can have a second meeting under the same SIG collector and have that. It's up to you.
Yeah, I just don't want to create too much process, to be honest. Whatever is lightweight, because this working group may also dissolve after a while, like once we address a couple of like big issues, or it may actually be a long-term group, and we can maybe turn it into a working group if we feel like it's going to be a more of like a long-term thing. Let's discuss maybe offline. I don't want to spend too much time in this meeting because there's a lot in the agenda.
Okay, we have then, thanks, Yana. So I will ping me whenever you have time. And I will help you scheduling at least one other meeting, but make sure you coordinate with a couple of the people that you talk to, and that the time is working for all of you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Punya.
Hi, so first one should be quick. I know we have a bunch of outstanding issues about migrating components from core to a different repository. I was curious what would happen to the code history, things like blame and PRs and stuff. So I tried a couple of approaches for doing that. I made a POC where I picked one approach just to show the trade-offs. There's a little description of what happens. Jurasi, thank you for your comment. I understand that point of view. I would be curious to hear from other people. It should not take very long to evaluate this, maybe like 2 or 3 minutes. So please, after the meeting, take a look and comment on the issue. I'm totally fine with any of the resolutions. I would just like to hear a few more comments. Sounds good. Basically, how much do we care about preserving history?
I think this is the like, take a look, like 2,500 commits need to be coming in. I think we shouldn't do this. I think it's fair to get rid of the history.
Yep. So I think Jurasi's comment is totally valid. And if we just say, great, when we make the merge, then we reference the commit, the last commit where it existed, so that people have an easy time going back.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable.
Hey, hold up, Punya.
Yep.
Can't we actually? I believe we could, for a directory, we could copy the entire Git history. Is that a problem?
Yeah, there is, and it causes this, I think.
You can read the, so Emmanuel, I called out that option also. You can take a look at, again, there are some downsides. It's a smaller number of commits, but now you will get duplicate commits when those commits touch multiple directories. And so the history will in the end, because we are porting like 70 commits, we may well end up with 2,500 commits, which are not the same commits that the ones we're talking about here.
Okay.
So, but absolutely, we can do that.
When doing a git blame on one file, you're not going to get 2,000 commits, right? You're only going to have like the 70 commits that touched that file. So it's not a huge problem.
Right.
I thought the problem, and I guess I was wrong, is that you would also get intermediary commits, even though that commit didn't touch that file. But if that's not the case,
in the history. Like if you do git log, you'll see it.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, in the git logs you would see it, but again, I mean, let's try to. Punya, I'll take a look, and again, I definitely err towards preserving history, but we need to figure out, the cross repo dependencies are the issue.
Another approach may be to just move all the components once to avoid the duplicate.
Yeah.
So by the way, if you do the full history approach, there will be no duplication of commits no matter how you move the components.
Perfect.
Right? Because the commit IDs are commit IDs. They're the same commit IDs.
Come again? They're the same commit IDs? No, they're not, right?
Yes, they are. I didn't do a subtree. They are the same commit IDs.
But, but when you merge them, they will get a new ID, correct?
No, you will get a new merge commit. The commit IDs are the same commit IDs.
Yeah, sure, I mean, the merge commit itself is a different SHA, but the commit itself.
One merge commit, right? So there's one merge commit for each time I bring the PR for each component migration, but that's one merge commit. All the historical commits are the same commit IDs as before.
Cool.
Right? That's the difference between doing a subtree cut and doing a whole doing the whole history. Anyways, I'm happy to write more on that issue. I think that's I don't think it is worth the communities. I don't think it's worth talking about it. I'm happy to answer that stuff. Please ask questions in the PR. I'll answer them.
Yeah. And I would like you, Punya, to also make a call, work with Alolita, Biana, whoever is interested, make a call. I'm just going to approve whatever PRs you want, and I'm going to press buttons, but I have no opinion on this. I mean,
yeah. Bogdan, no worries. I mean, I have been working with Punya, so definitely we'll follow up on that.
Cool. Now I have a second thing to talk about after the Git surgery, which is always fun. Jurasi, yes, signed commits are going to be signed. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Because the hashes are the same. Exactly.
Yes.
That's a really good point. With the subtree strategy, the signed commits will now no longer be signed. It's a really good point. So Emmanuel, if I cut, if I slice by directory, then the signed commits will now be, it will look like someone is impersonating Bogdan in our code.
Well, so do the old signed commits actually matter? Because in order for signed commits to be changed, they would have to go rewrite the history. I think just to preserve history, we shouldn't matter. Signed commits shouldn't matter too much. It's after we've done the migration that we can restore signed commits from that head. Does that make sense?
I don't fully understand, but again, if you can comment on the issue, we can carry on the discussion there.
Cool.
A comment on the POC here.
Is the link pasted in here?
It's in the SIG notes.
It's in the notes. I can
paste
it here.
Yeah, Emmanuel, I can. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jan.
Merci.
Punya, you have a last one as well.
Yes, last issue. Thank you, Alex. Okay, so the last issue. We've had a few instances now for the ones I'm familiar with. We changed Stackdriver Exporter to Google Cloud Exporter. And now we're talking about doing some other changes that will, where we will create one processor, and later on, the functionality will be subsumed into something else. So I'm wondering if it makes sense for us to have a config rewrite layer so that the processor can truly be deprecated safely. Again, if this has been discussed before, please let me know. I can read the old discussion.
You mean like taking the existing old configuration and transforming it to the new one?
Correct. So if I can write, so if I can, when let's say that the new let, I'll talk about the two examples I know about. One is this change from Stackdriver to Google Cloud. So today we have a Google. What we have is a Go module dependency between this the kind of the correct name and the old deprecated name. And maintaining this Go module dependency is a little bit complicated because the tooling doesn't understand. The tooling expects that all the modules in contrib repo are totally independent.
Mhm.
So if you have a dependency from one module to another, it's slightly awkward.
I would challenge you a bit and ask why do you not merge them in the same module? Because it's essentially no extra dependencies or anything. It's just for the name. You can probably have one module that produces both names.
That's a
That
good
will
idea. I think we'll do that.
That's something that you can do as a very short term, like
No, that's
in
great.
20,
I'll do
in
it.
20
But
minutes.
isn't it gonna break the import path? Like you can't really reorganize, right? Like because
Nobody,
stick to every exporter as a import
yeah,
path.
but people don't usually import that exporter. I mean,
Mm.
that's something that may break, but I don't
Yeah,
think people
yeah.
are
That's
I'm saying it's a
importing that.
valid answer, right? Like even if I say, oh, I wish I had done that, I didn't do it. Now I have to pay some price, but at least I can tell future people, if you rename something, this is the same thing to do.
this is what we are actually going to be also doing, like CloudWatch exporter. We have like two exporters now, logs and EMF. We want to merge them at some point. We were just waiting for logs to become more stabilized. Like at some point, we just want to have like, CloudWatch exporter doing both. So we will probably end up being in this situation too.
So the other situation I want to talk about is like this idea of specialized processors that we are now merging that will eventually be subsumed by a more generalized one.
Yeah.
Right. It would be very nice if we could say, great, once the generalized one is ready, we got the specialized one, and just leave it as a little rule that says, when you see a processor config for this thing, construct the other one. Now, of course, again, you can do this. You can write a factory today that will create the other thing. But at that point, you are creating a Go module dependency. And again, dealing with these issues, it might be simpler if you could say, oh, don't use this config, use this other config. I'm just doing a YAML transformation. So happy to find an issue about this, but I wanted to bring it up in this group because we are just
Punya, this was discussed earlier also when we discussed the general processor design and how we would retain configurations across renamed components or new components being used instead of the old ones. And there is some discussion in the design doc also on this that we have addressed. If you can please take a look at that again, happy to, again, there is obviously a configuration layer that we need to take care of so that there are no breaking changes for the customer or the end user. But, again, let's kind of drill down into it a bit more in terms of how we would do these configuration rewrites, because I don't necessarily think it's only a Go module problem, right?
Yeah, I don't think it is. I think it's a general issue. I remember the issue was touched upon in that design. I don't remember a resolution, but I will.
We added, a section. Min actually did some more work on that. So that's, if you could please take a look at it. I'm happy to schedule more time to go through it.
This is great. I see the section and I will read in more detail. Thanks, Alita. That's all.
I have one more question actually related to this. So right now you're trying to motivate people to move from the deprecated module to the new one. Do you like log anything like, hey, this is deprecated? Like what is your overall?
We do right now.
Okay, so you log something saying that like this is deprecated, to use something else. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and also the discussion also has been around, do we actually explicitly tag experimental, in the name of the component versus, removing that tag, right? So again, there have been different options that have been also considered there.
Yeah, for deprecation, we don't have those options in the name. So I was wondering what's the best way to signal it.
Yeah.
Login is probably the best way. Login deprecation.
Should we have something like build a small tool that can move from version to version of the collector?
That would be super useful. Like if we write a single place, like a single tool, and all these vendors coming in and like, adding their like, rewrite whatever, that would be super useful.
I think
And
if you're
that
talking about
doesn't need any dependency. Sorry, Punya, but that doesn't need any dependency on any component, correct? Because it's going to be on YAML file. So it's even though there is going to be some vendor specific code, but it's not going to bring any dependency. It's just going to be some regex and whatever strings.
Actually, like you want to, have the structs, right? Like the config structs. You may want to have the config structs. I don't know. I mean, depends on the type of rewrite, right? You can duplicate them as well. So you would like to duplicate actually. Anyways, I'm sorry.
Yeah, for the operator, we have something similar. So the operator takes care of upgrading from one version to another, and we have this logic there already. So I just pasted a link here in the chat of one upgrade from the previous version of, or no, what is that? What it takes to get into 0.19.0, which is quite old now. And what we do is we go over the configuration, and we know, well, we go to the release notes, and then before releasing the operator, we make a upgrade routine, and that is part of the 0.19.0 of the operator. So whenever an operator 0.18 is migrated to 0.19, this function here is executed. So most of the logic to migrate those kinds of configuration files, it's there already. And based on our history here and based on the Jaeger history as well, most of the updates, they're quite easy. So new flags that appear, they're replacing old flags, so it's just renaming flags. In our case here, we had one big change with endpoints, I think, became host ports instead of endpoints or vice versa. But all of that could be done with Go code and no external dependencies whatsoever.
Yeah, I think.
How do you know the source version?
What is that?
How do you know the version that you're upgrading from? Like if I give you a config file.
Yeah, the operator for version 0.19 provisions a collector 0.19. And whenever there is a new upgrade, so I look at the CR. So we store the state in the CR. So if you have a hotel call CR in your Kubernetes, in the status object, we store what is the version of that OpenTelemetry collector. And whenever a new operator starts, it looks for all the operands that it takes care of and migrates one by one.
So I think this makes sense, but this is like you're relying on something very nice, which is that the CR tracks the state, and we don't have that natively. I'm wondering if it makes sense to have a baseline version kind of annotation in our config.
That's actually, that's a very useful thing to have.
But we can have that, but then it will become a problem because you need to have a version for every component.
Every component, yeah.
Not for the entire file.
And the problem here is components actually, like, the collector itself doesn't really break the config.
Yep, exactly. And also there are other dependencies on, say, Prometheus, which actually does not do versioning today at all. We had this discussion in the Prometheus work group earlier today with Richard and the Prometheus team. And, they don't have a clear way of actually versioning all the components that are available in the, because they don't look at Prometheus as a library. So there is an issue in terms of being able to establish clear versioning for every single component across the board and having that.
So Urasi, I guess for the collector, for the operator, this is okay because you have a canonical distribution or release that you are concerned with.
Yep.
And if we wanted to use the collector, the operator with a custom distribution, your upgrades would not necessarily be sufficient. Is that right?
Well, it is, but we make an assumption in the operator. We make the assumption that if you're using the operator 0.19, then you're using a collector that is compatible with 0.19.
That's correct. And I mean, but that information, Jurassic, is in the change log, right? I mean, it's not necessarily being encoded anywhere else.
It's not. I mean, if someone creates a CR and they overwrite the image field for their collector, we just have to assume that they know what they're doing and that they are using a version that is compatible or based on the same version of the operator.
So I guess the other way to look at this is the upgrade is currently centralized. And if we said that collector components get to upgrade their config, then you could do this in a pluggable fashion. But that would be obviously a much more complicated design.
Then you get into version management, right? And version control management, and you have to have some kind of a tagging mechanism at that point, which is not at the at the go level, but actually at the release level, where you need to have a tagging convention.
And the configuration file can be coming from a configuration management mechanism, right? So you're overriding a file which is not the source of truth.
Yep.
Now, I don't know.
I mean, that's way more complex than what we are doing.
Yeah, I think I want to stay out of this topic because it is, it is way too complex for my head. But one thing that I keep thinking of is we can and we should do better with backwards compatibility. So do changes in 2 or 3 stages, right? And we do that on the Jaeger side as well. So before we remove something, we deprecate it for at least 2 versions. Like 2 versions before, we add a warning. 1 version before, we add a big warning, and the version that we remove, we just break things, right? That should be enough for people to get a heads up. And if they're looking at the logs, which they should, then they have enough time to migrate to the new convention.
But Jurassic, that's a convention you're adopting on the project, which is okay. That's totally okay. I mean, but that's not necessarily built into the tooling, right? That's just a convention that the project has adopted. So I mean, that's a good way of doing it in the short run.
Yeah, I think we already have the validate and on the configs and stuff, and a plan to do the dry run. Maybe another option is to add a command on the collector, check for deprecated or whatever we call it, but some things that can tell you that, hey, you are using deprecated components. If that, I think that would be ideal, like kind of similar with the dry run, but that tells you that, hey, you are, or even the dry run can be, the answer can be, you are using deprecated fields or deprecated components. Here are things that you need to change.
And we can just return a specific error from the validate or something. It could be as easy as that.
Even that, I think, will be cool, and have that option for people and say, hey, you should run this before upgrading to the next version and see what changed.
Yeah, I think as part of any kind of a builder, we'd have to do that. I mean, it's like a dependency checker, and
it's not only builder. I think it needs support from the core to do some validation of the config and some codes. But yeah, I think I like the I think this is another topic to Jana's mini.
Yeah, this is exactly what productionization group will be working on.
Yeah, so I think we should all put more thoughts into Jana's document, add comments there for topics.
Yeah, please feel free to add items, like even if there's not an issue, it's just more of like a laundry list of things that we should care about at this point.
Yep, Jana, good suggestion. Good.
Okay, do we have any more topics for today?
I think we finally ran out.
Are we done?
Yep, looks like it.
Okay, thank you. FYI, we just released half an hour ago 0.31 for core, and planning a release for contrib soon. The biggest update for the new release is we finished the metrics transition in core, and we have all the new support for the new metrics.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Logan.
Congrats and thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Uh,
Hello. Hey, am I audible? Hello. Hello.
Hey, Paulo.
Oh, how are you doing, Zach? Oh, we have someone new. I'm gonna guess your name, Seth. I will ask you later, Seth, to introduce yourself after more folks join the meeting.
Yeah, I was worried I wasn't gonna join the right Zoom meeting because last time, with all the calendar changes, me, Greg, and Chris joined the wrong meeting and then had to switch over to the real meeting.
Oh. Yes, that's a pain. Yeah, that's a good point. Let's check if I'm there. We are in the right.
Yeah. Because last time I hadn't updated my calendar, and then after our meeting last week, I made sure to clear out the calendar and re-add it, so everything's good now. But
Yeah, I had to do the same thing, you know. Yeah, no, we are in the right meeting. Well, which is surprising because where are the other folks?
yeah, that is surprising.
Let me check here. Let me ping some people just to be sure if. Yeah, I think you'll be just us then. Let's go until the 35 and then we start.
For whatever reason, I still have the wrong meeting ID in my calendar.
I think you have to.
Yeah, I had to go out. I had to remove the calendar events and then re-add them from the new calendar. So now it's working for me, unlike last week.
Yeah. I've done that like 3 times, so.
Really? Oh.
Yeah.
So next time that somebody very nicely asks, "Oh, can you change the meeting?" and I said, "No," because hi, Greg. Because basically it was the conflict, and I said, "Oh, sure, no problem." You know, we changed the calendar, but then after that, it was not easy at all. So. Okay, so I think everyone that's gonna join is here. I don't know. Since we have a name that I didn't see before in the meetings, Seth, would like you to introduce yourself? Okay. Yeah.
Do you have a quiet observer?
Yeah, I think it is the preference. So yeah. All right.
Sure.
Let me share my screen here with the notes. All right. I put some topics related to some of the stuff that we talked before and some of the PRs. So on the POC branch, we kind of experiment I started. I think I had mentioned this before, but I started a PR to kind of, hey, let's remove the strong name because we don't ship a NuGet package. Nobody, in theory, is gonna link against the anything all of the POC, and also in theory that doesn't prevent us from loading any instrumentation as long as we do properly without using the reference to a strong name. So, and actually a bit faster than I was expecting, Robert merged my PR before you had a kind of discussion on that. I wanted to hear if anybody has any concern. It's on the POC branch, but if you already anticipate some problem or if you have any concern about that, the main advantage is just to simplify things, you know. I basically wanted to kind of not have to do internals and perhaps remove the configuration for the build, you know, about using strong names.
So did you find that we were still able to instrument assemblies that were strong named?
Yes, yes. And basically what we have to think that happens there is basically the following. And on the POC branch, we build an application. The application is a strong name signed. It uses a library that's a strong name signed, and we instrument both to be sure that things are working. The main thing is that basically is in the end is assembly load code, right? But since we don't have the strong name and the application could have, but the application has for its own reference, the stuff that we inject on the code end up happening with the load without the key and without the other information. And it, at least so far, it has worked. The cost of re-adding if we find something is not that big, so I thought it was a good moment to experiment with this on the POC branch.
Now, I could be completely wrong about this, but was there an old security control that could be used so that only strong named assemblies could be loaded within a process?
Windows has some restrictions about that. I think you can do some, I don't know the defaults of that. I should because I did some work on that, but I don't remember. But there is some restrictions about what assembly load can do, you know, on the framework. The test that I did encounter that. It worked with the default configuration. So I don't know if it's possible for perhaps somebody to kind of lock down the machine in a way that doesn't work. But I would say that at least on the typical flow, it's working, you know. So perhaps I should try to follow up on that with assembly, let's say, assembly load lockdown on Windows. I don't have a better name for this. I think actually, as I said, I think I actually worked on that, but I really don't remember what was that. You know, I do remember that there was some scenarios that we prevent loading if there was a change or if it's kind of injected code kind of PowerShell trying to load that we prevent. It's something along those lines. I don't remember. I have to check. So I'll kind of try to do a follow-up on this. But as I said, at least the test that I did with the framework, and of course, the concern is with framework because .NET Core, it's nothing about the the strong name, but I will do a follow-up on that. Okay. So Robert didn't join us today, and I kind of wanted to discuss this PR, this pull request here. The main thing is because we use source instrumentations with the SDK, and in the case that, for instance, the code was trying to automatically load a bunch of instrumentations, but the application doesn't have the dependency. So, for instance, we are trying to load the source instrumentation for ASP.NET Core, and it's a console app, so the dependencies are not there. So the approach here, it seems, at least for now, the approach will be kind of, one has to be explicit about the source instrumentations that they want to add. I tend to think that that's fine, in line with the OpenTelemetry.NET, because there you don't get any instrumentation without you explicitly or adding the instrumentation during setup time, or kind of adding a source to listen to those activity source. So I think it's in line with that, but it's different than a lot of the instrumentation. It's different from what Datadog does. It's different from a lot of the instrumentations that we have. I think it's also different from New Relic. But at least in the short run, I think it's the safest approach. One needs to be explicit about what source instrumentations they're going to add.
Yeah, so I think that that's a good approach short term. I know that one thing that we've done in the past was sort of declare a minimum set of dependencies. And then if those dependencies are satisfied, then we attempt to load the instrumentation. So that could be something that's used down the road if we want to make the experience smoother. But yeah, I think the explicit approach is fine.
I will be curious because that's kind of, it was one of the things that came to my mind, but I want to ask how that worked in practice. It was reasonable, just a few corner cases, or?
Yeah, so it ended up being just a few corner cases, and so a lot of it was trying not to have dependencies in the first place, but then our big dependency was net standard.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was easy to detect that and then only attempt to load some things if net standard was detected.
I see. And did you do something like try to load this? I am not sure how it would work with the SDK, but because this is something that crossed my mind also, is kind of on the load of the assemblies and kind of keep track. Oh, I'm loading this assembly, I'm loading this assembly, I'm loading this assembly. Oh, I complete the set for this instrumentation, and then kick the instrumentation.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a few tricks that we've used. And so nested statics being some of them.
I see. So perhaps when we get to that stage, we look at and this is part of the New Relic open source code, right?
Right.
Yes. Yeah. So
yeah, because I mean the idea is that there's a set of instrumentation libraries, and we attempt to load all of the libraries, but there's a intermediate layer that sort of has a handle to the instrumentation code, and then we check to see if it's relevant or not. And then if something needs access to types that are in another assembly, that's where we use a nested static trick, because then the statics will only cause that dependency to be loaded if the static ends up getting used, or the first time it gets used, and so on.
I see. Yeah, so I think when if we eventually get to that, then I think we look at the code that is there on New Relic to use as a base. It's already functionally testing practice. So yeah, we can leverage that experience there. So that was that. This the other PR. Rasmus started this big PR with a lot of renames and adding tests. It's kind of quite big, but I think it's, except by one bug that Robert pointed, I think it's almost ready to be merged. But on the other hand, I know that Rasmus is on a PTO. So I think I have the rights, not only, I have the rights on our repo for sure. I'm gonna do a pass and try to just close that so we can make progress there and not have kind of him have to rebase this thing when he get back, and not us also moving ahead and then having to pull stuff from there. So I will try to see the bugs and run this locally. If there are no bugs, I think I will merge basically as it is, so we can make progress and avoid that. There was a thread on Slack about the versions covered by the SDK, the hotel SDK, because they being Microsoft, they are very following very close with the end of life dates. I know that a lot of the users are not so diligent about that, but I think for us, since we don't have a version released, for now, it's a kind of a path forward for us with the SDK is just to follow that. And I would say that in general, the vendors have offerings for the lower versions. So customers that users that wanna move to OpenTelemetry with auto instrumentation, you have to deal with this version requirements from the SDK. I would say that's not ideal, but is the pace that things are moving, which reminds about other thing. So we are doing some changes on the SDK, like environment variable configuration. That's why Robert actually started that PR with the SDK version bump, because he added the environment variables for Jaeger, and we were handling on the POC branch. And now actually you can remove that code and the SDK itself handles that. And we are doing this for more and more. But that puts us in a position that we need to update the reference. And they don't plan another official release until November, when they should have update spec and metrics. But they are releasing about every month or so. They are releasing alpha beta versions of the SDK. And that's, I think we're gonna be updating whenever they have a new version, we update to get these fixes that we are putting on the SDK. Of course, if we need something earlier than that to test, to validate, we can always ask people on the SDK to publish release for us, you know. But the cadence we should expect should be every month by default, let's say. Siju did mention that they plan to perhaps have more frequently if they need something for metrics. So if we see any other release, perhaps we can take advantage of that. But anyway, once more, if we feel the need, we can ask them. Sorry about my dogs here. Somebody is walking outside and he's giving me the alarm.
Zach, Greg, do you have any concerns about the .NET Framework support there?
No, I don't really have
Sorry,
any concerns. No.
I was muted. Me neither. Sorry.
Okay. I think last meeting I mentioned a little bit about kind of doing some validations for the DevOps scenarios. I had done some initial in the last meeting, I think, and after that I look a little bit more in the .NET framework, kind of trying to do binary redirects with already built applications. It worked so far. Whatever I tried, kind of having a dependence of a dependence, and if I do the proper redirect, that sometimes is not easy to get right. That's kind of annoying because you have the dependence of the dependence. Basically, you have to do something like this. You have to scan the NuGet package, look at their dependencies, and kind of bring all of that to the redirects. And as long as the instrumentation have that, everything that I tried work. You know, as I said in the past, I don't think we have anyone that's going to be able to take care of that kind of for this release with the SDK, this eventual alpha. But it seems a path that we can look in the future. You know, I'm doing this because I want to be sure that perhaps we have some path there. You know, kind of not very complicated or hard to implement, and it seems reasonable so far, which gets me a kind of an idea that perhaps a .NET tool will be very good for that. You know, Robert had mentioned this before, and I think down the line, if we get to the point, we perhaps can have a .NET command line tool that kind of you give some information and you just have the XZ and it generates this kind of, at least the bind redirect configs, and make the scenario easier for people that are in this case that they don't have access to the build project. So far so good. I don't want to be kind of too optimistic about that. I really want to do some more validations and tests, but so far so good. Okay, these were the topics that I wanted to cover. Anyone want to bring something up? It's always good to wait and talk a little bit because then something pops on your mind, you know. So Greg has been very quiet, so maybe he's thinking about something important. So I don't know.
I've been working on profiles and performance for the last while, so that's why I'm sort of you know, my context is a little limited to what I can walk away from these meetings.
I see. Yeah. On that note, if you don't mind, I'm very curious because you've been worried about the performance using the event pipe. So are you going with the traditional approach of sampling from the CLR profiler, or did you manage to somehow get event pipe to perform?
Yeah, I think what it was not so much about the event pipe itself. It was about the mechanism specifically for profiling and collection of stack information. The CLR uses a particular approach to collecting this information before exporting the collected information through the event pipe. And my concern was with that mechanism rather than with the event pipe itself. Specifically, the CLR suspends threads like for AGC, but all threads. That means if you request the stack information then it will, at regular intervals, suspend the entire runtime. That means issue a suspension kind of signal and then wait until all of the threads reach a safe point and then stop. And then it will start collecting the information, collect it, and then resume everything. And that is very slow because of all these waits. So it's really not suitable for in production use. For dev scenarios, it's just fine. So that is why we decided not to use it. It wasn't the event pipe itself.
Mm-hmm.
So if in some, and we talked with Noah about this about 2 months back. So if in some future, the CLR uses a more performant approach to actually doing getting the collection done, then of course event pipes can be used. And by as a second challenge with event pipes, of course, it's not supported in all the versions that we are all targeting here. I mean, we can drop for 5, but full framework is going to stay for several years. So because of that, we are using the traditional APIs.
I see. ETW works very well on Windows, but then it's not portable.
The challenge with ETW is you need to own the box in order to use it. And actually, I would be very curious about how your customers react to this. So we unfortunately made the experience that there are enough customers who are not okay with giving the some sort of agent or tracer or whatever you call it, admin privileges. So so because of that, I don't know, did you make a different experience?
We because we don't require for the stuff that we require perhaps that install, but we don't require to run the stuff under admin. We are not doing profile, we are not doing ETW, you know. So we don't have that pushback, but I'm sure that in the case if we require that, and basically ETW does require that, I'm sure that you'll be the same pushback. One thing that I will say is that you can give, there is a specific right on the Windows that you can give for people to be able to profile, you know. You don't need to make admin. You can give a specific right for people to sample with ETW. I don't remember but there is one specific that you can say, hey, this user has it.
So I actually would love to know more details. Perhaps I'm missing something. So far, from what I know, is there are different ETWs. And so, for example, if I want to capture the ETW coming from the .NET process, from the process that runs the application, then yes, that is possible with non-admin privileges. However, the stacks are so-called kernel ETW events. So they're not emitted by the process running the actual application. They are emitted by the kernel. And for
that's
those,
true. I was writing the anti-ransomware using ETW. Yeah, you need admin. And also there's one additional problem. On some Windows versions, it's only possible to attach one ETW listener. I think it was like Windows 7 and 8.1. I don't know how many customers you have them, but we had also some issues that only basically is a bug or missing feature on some Windows kernel version.
That I didn't hit, but perhaps because you know, we kind of didn't get that far with so many different Windows versions because we hit the admin problem. So to collect ETWs from that come from the runtime, like, you know, GC events and other events that are specifically related to the behavior of the .NET runtime, that is possible in ETW with just, as you mentioned, special permissions. But in order to collect stack like CPU and walk-log profiling, that those events are coming from the kernel, and that is not possible as non-admin, unless I missed something, which would be a pity.
Once more, the thing, you do need some specific privilege to do that, and by default, just the admin has that, I think. So you can give this privilege to other users, but I don't remember the set, and I don't remember if the set is really contained, you know, kind of, perhaps is one of those things that when you give that right, you actually gain a bunch of other things, you know. So I'll try to dig that. This is in my memory for a long time. I don't remember. I was just trying to search, but I don't even remember the name, you know.
I'd love to learn more about this. The challenge is, of course, that once you start looking at these stack ATWs, it's not per process; it's for everything. You can filter them after collection, but
yes,
it's for everything, and that means essentially it gives you a lot of knowledge about every application that runs on the box. And so it's a lot of power and can be used for all sorts of weird things. And because of that, it makes sense that they're restricted to, if not admin, then at least to users with, who have very high privileges already.
Yes, yes. I think the Windows that did something about the process, but basically what they did is basically they filter, and actually the listener has to specify. So basically, yeah, you listen to everything, you know. So
okay. Yeah, unfortunately, I wish I could use ETW. It's way less invasive, but I couldn't get this to work, and it was permissions that were acceptable to customers. So we're using like a normal profiler.
Yeah, there may be another complication with ETW2, and I really don't remember the details, but one of my former teammates was experimenting with ETW so that we could tune our agent, and what we found was when our profiler was attached, we weren't able to see all the ETW events.
The ones that came from the runtime, or which ones?
I don't remember all the details. I just remember we only got a subset of the data. So then we had to add some work into our profiler so that we could then be able to forward some of that ETW data out of our profiler, or something along those lines. So we ended up having to embed some of the code from, I'm blanking on the name of that tool that's used to view ETW.
Earthview.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, I use the profiling APIs, which of course adds a bunch of work once to run together with all the tracers, because they also are like a profiler. So that's one thing that can be worked out, but it's a bunch of to-dos. And also because we want to be very efficient and selective with suspending threads, we use OS APIs to suspend threads, which then means that you invasively just suspend the thread, which could be holding all sorts of locks, and then we start stack walking it. But as you do this, you get all sorts of weird deadlock occurrences. So there is a bunch of very tricky stuff around that. We all, when we write managed code, we all kind of strive to write lock-free code. This is an aside, right? And the thing is, it's in managed world, it's still sometimes tricky, but it's quite feasible if you are trained in it to write log-free code. But what you forget is sort of not really log-free, because all the memory management and things like that you sort of ignore, and the logs that are taking there are not the logs that you are kind of, then they don't count for your log-freeness. But in native, you don't get this luxury, and things are not as log-free as you think. Like any memory allocation can take a glob of log. That means almost any API that somehow deals with something non-trivial can take a global log. Any output, any bigger IO, is not log-free. And all sorts of Windows API invocations are not lock-free, and even global locks, not just like shared between a few things. So it's tricky. But it's fun. It's interesting.
All right. Yeah, no, interesting. I just because we talked about when I have a time, I will try to dig those privileges. I really think that they don't solve, especially because the issue, I think when you give that privilege to anybody, I think you give access to our process, because you can sample our process. So
yeah.
But just for the completeness of our conversation, I'll put on Slack or something so people.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. Thank you.
All right. If someone doesn't want you to step up and say anything, I'm gonna jump out.
So related to the call stacks and things like that, there was another question in Slack that I think you responded to, Paulo, about somebody wanting a feature that I forget which vendor provides, but provides something that looks like a stack trace, but it's not quite, if I remember right, based on when I used that software. And
yes.
So I don't know. I've kind of found that the full stacks are nice, but I haven't found that as being a necessity for figuring out issues.
Yeah, and I think one thing and there is a bit of that, I think there is a bit of feature creep in this case, because I think distributed tracing, the sweet spot for distributed tracing is showing the interactions between different services where you have to carry context. But I understand that the devs want to also see that as a kind of profiler, but I think there is a bit of feature creep. But basically, it looked to me what the person was asking was about instrumentation profiler, that ones that collect every stack and measure the duration of every stack, After I posted that, actually, but the guy didn't back, I actually found a slight better way of doing than what I posted that, because it was a good to refresh my memory. So there is a stack frame that you can create directly getting the previous frame, so the information that he gets, but I'm talking about, say, shaving perhaps some nanoseconds here and there, I think that thing should be expensive anyway. But I think there is, I was curious for the guy to come back, and because I really want to have the conversation to understand where he's coming from. But my impression was a little bit of feature creep, They wanted to see distributed tracing as a instrumentation profiler, which is kind of, I consider two different things,
Yeah, and this whole stack unwinding and collecting is doing it fast is not trivial. The facilities in the CLR that exist, they're doing this for exceptions and for security, because sometimes you need to know who called you to decide with the security context, and so they unwind all sorts of things. And that takes, per unwind, it's very fast. But if you start doing this, every millisecond or something, it adds up. So it's not trivial to make it like kind of production ready. Actually, pity that the Microsoft guys are not here today. I was just looking at a very interesting thing that I'm observing during unwinding that I really did not expect to actually see, and I'm thinking that it's the CLR who creates some or emits some code that doesn't conform to Windows calling conventions. But I could also be wrong and missing, because it's like really, really deep details. And I wanted to ask them about this. It's there are these things called leaf functions, and I'm observing them in places where I didn't expect them.
I actually did work with some of that stuff, but it's 10 years ago. I can't remember anything, So there was the concurrence visualizer for Visual Studio. I work on that, and one of the things that I did was to parse the stacks and find the proper symbols. And there is some trickery there on the calling conventions. You are right. I don't remember, but even some, let's say, non-standard stuff generate the stack that, of course, works, but of course, then the profiler can understand whatever you did there on the stack.
There is this, in x64, you put information about your functions in a table. So when you unwind stacks, you can look up your like where your function code is from this table. And there's a Windows API that you can call to get this information, which is called I forgot what it's called. But there is also such a thing like a frameless function. Or usually for Windows it's just called leave function, a function that doesn't call anybody and it doesn't require a function entry. So when you unwind such a stack, you just kind of determine that this function doesn't have an entry in this table, and then you just change your stack pointer to look at the next one. But I really did not expect to find such a thing in the middle of a stack. So you have a frameless function, but it did call somebody because it just arrived in it by unwinding the stack. So I don't know whether it's like the CLR is doing this for some sort of optimization or what the deal with it is. So yeah.
I talk about Windows stacks. I remember when I had to debug a Go application with WinDBG. It was not fun. The stacks look like no stacks. You have basically to operate with WinDBG to understand the stacks of Windows, what is being called from Windows, and a Go debugger to understand what the Go code is doing, because it doesn't look like anything to WinDBG. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Needs an SOS Go.
Yeah, next hackathon project. All right. Nice to see everyone. See you next week, and as soon as I find the stuff, I'll publish on the
Just a quick question: were there any questions to me because I got very late to my PR or anything?
We talked about your PR, about the requirement to be explicit about the source instrumentations, but we agree that that is the path right now. And Chris mentioned that actually New Relic had some experience with kind of checking the modules to kind of load the instrumentations. In the future, if you want to invest on that, we should look at the code that New Relic has to kind of build from that experience.
Is it open source?
Yeah, it's open source.
Cool. Wonderful. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, then.
See you.
All right, bye.
Thanks, bye-bye.